My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to The AstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today, we'll be doing the floor tour of Invictus 2955. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. We've got a good one for you. Welcome! My name is Paul, Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub, your professor on the AstroHistorian, and your moderator on the Captain's Table podcast. We are going to be doing the floor tour. We're going to get everything set up. I'm already in game, but if you want to join us live, I'll be on the floor. You can hop in on the Discord and follow along as we walk through. I won't be able to do the voice on the floor, but you know, it's been fun. Welcome Perry, welcome RD, and welcome Jin. So the idea behind this is what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a floor tour. And from there, we're going to go to do the a relic hunt. So I'll be hanging out with the rest of my league, my organization, the League of Relic Enthusiasts. We're going to be going to do some relic hunting afterwards, at least for a short bit. Thank you. Hey Marcus, how you doing? How's everyone's Invictus been? Other than the obvious controversies. Those of you who know, I try to keep the AstroHistorian and the Astropub separate when it comes to a lot of this stuff, because the I find that it doesn't really pay much in terms of like community building to have a lore channel that delves into controversies which, you know, frankly aren't that important in the lore. They're important to people's experience of the game, which totally reasonable, totally understandable. But in terms of the actual like story, most people, you know, Bethesda does dumb shit all the time. You know, Bungie and Microsoft do bad stuff all the time, but rarely do you see the lore channels be like, all right, let's address this controversy and then address the story implications of it. It's just like, yeah. Yeah, this is the last lore tour of the I thought I was going to do one on Wednesday, but that's literally it's going to end before that. So we'll try to do something else. But those of you who only watch me for lore, I do play the game. I stream the game quite frequently. I cover the news and other updates as well. So if you're wondering, like, why does Paul not show up to, like, why does it take Paul so long to do videos? And it's like, well, A, it takes a long time to research and edit, but also because I'm doing different channels plus live streaming pretty frequently. And no, it's not worth it. It's not worth the effort I put into it. Other than I like doing content. I like making stuff. I've not played in a long time. I still have my Sulian. Got one caravan for free. Nice. Star Citizen is in a much better place than it's ever been in terms of like content and in terms of playability. Does the floor include Drake in a planetary area? It does not. So the in-fiction reason why Drake isn't doing Defense Con is because they got kicked out of Area 18, so they can't do it. They're not allowed to come back. So they're still doing the sales on this website, but they're not doing it on the floor. The meta reason why is because they tried to do rotating floors in IAE like they usually do, and it broke something, and so they decided that they weren't going to do that because it wasn't working. And instead of investigating why it wasn't working, they just decided to completely rescape how they were going to do the floors for these sorts of events. And I think it's better overall because of that, but definitely the catalyst was because it was broken in the last IAE. Thank you, guy. Yeah, for those who don't know, my full-time job is teaching. I teach social studies. I've taught history in the past. I do have a history degree, but I right now teach government and economics. So, okay, thanks. I'm moving my houses so my PC's packed. I couldn't check it out. Yeah, it's all right. There'll be more free flights in the future. They do them a lot, like pretty much once a month, it seems like. Hoping we get a massive what they need to do is, if they're going to do this sort of thing in the future, is they need to expand the hall. So we have more space, because I think the current hall is just not quite up to task, especially when they get dynamic meshing in. They should have a hall that's just a server. All right. Let me get into this storage area and swap out. All right. Floor tour. The floor tour. So the idea is I'm going to go to the floor of Invictus, and I'm going to go around and show you all the floor. Drake Day, so the Paul will play. What the? Okay.
For the latest travel information, be sure to check the departure and arrival boards, conveniently located throughout the spaceport.
The life-saving technology might not be as safe as previously thought. Imperator Addison released a statement calling for an all-hands-on-deck approach to finding a solution.
I understand that a lot of people are scared, but know that we are leveraging the full power of the UEE and the scientific community
Obey
to
all
rectify
security
this
and
problem as
customs
quickly as
personnel at
possible.
all times. Their job is your safety.
Yeah, these screens are all naturally fuzzy, so they're kind of fuzzy in general in game. I don't know why. What do the spawn locations feel most like home, Paul? I would say Area 18 feels pretty good, but like everyone likes Microtech the best. I think it's the best crafted. Messer would have never let regen fail. If you spot any power plants for the Asgard, you can let me know, please. Power plants for the Asgard. Well, it was in the PTU, but I found it's only in this area now. I think they've changed things up. Like that hangar or the spaceport area. Unfortunately, Drake Day does not mean that there's anything on the floor for Drake. Ugh. I mean, the real answer is Levski. Levski's what feels like home, but we can't go back to Levski yet. Soon, but not yet. Thank you, Rage, for that 12 months of support. 1 year of support on Twitch. Use that subscription. Yes, the Hunt of Blairs has worked for me once. Johnson, cheers to chat, y'all. If you can buy one on the shore floor. What is the power plant for? Because I mean, I'm sure you can get a power plant that will work for the Asgard, but like. I should have one. The Levski has a full. They basically took that borehole and went straight through the asteroid, and the entire hole in the asteroid, that borehole in the asteroid, are all docks. They're all space docks and cargo centers. So. Oh no! My PC died today. She was several years old, looking for new parts or for the new build. That sucks. It's the worst time to do that right now. The outside cargo elevators will be so cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll work. Let's see if there's anybody in Discord. There's nobody in Discord, so it might just be me walking chat through the floor, which is fine.
Line of defenders from Aegis Dynamics have already been battle tested throughout the Empire and beyond. With that kind of success, it's no wonder that the Navy expanded their roster of Aegis ships in their fleet. Not nearly at the numbers that our UEE Army brethren order, the Navy maintains an active, versatile fleet of ground vehicles as well, whether for logistics, transport, or even exploration operations.
Relic hunt? There's going to be a relic hunt after this. Obviously no ironclad at ILW, but it's been absent from the monthly reports for a long time too. Would love to see what the hint was going on that. Not really the AstroHistorian side of things, it's more of the AstroPub stuff, but I've talked about that in the past in the AstroPub, which is basically just no news is good news. Last we heard it was in Gray Box. It takes a while to go from Gray Box to Laud and Zero and Final Art. It's a big shit. So it's probably not gonna. We'll probably get an update in the next couple of monthly reports, but we won't know until it goes into Lot Zero, basically. What are these mythical relics you speak of? They're in game, multiple. In fact, they just added a new one this patch. Hey, we watch my content on YouTube, and you had first time seeing on stream. Glad to see you. Come on. Yeah, war metals, alien relics. There's other metals. There's also precious metal bars that I haven't seen. So. You actually use them for unlocking certain things with Wicklow as well. So you have some value. Awesome. I don't know who this is. Welcome to the party, though. Oh, it's you, right, Darko? If anybody else wants to join in, let me know. You can add me as in game as the AstroPub, and you can hop on Discord, and I will be talking on Discord here shortly. So I'm gonna give it another, let's see, 15, 20 minutes. So.
You are invited to train with the Marines on the hostile environments of Korea.
Are relics going to have a meaning in the game in the future? Well, right now they do. They have a meaning for specifically Wicklow, but I'm sure there will be vendors who will purchase them for cash, or they'll have some value for crafting. We just don't have that yet.
For centuries, Invictus has been a time for friends and family to come together and celebrate the cause of duty, service, and civic pride.
Defunding the future.
Though not nearly at the numbers that our UEE Army Brethren order, the Navy maintains an active, versatile fleet of ground vehicles as well, whether for logistics, transport, or even exploration operations.
Can you tell us more about Levski? I have not heard about it before now. Give me 2 seconds.
Although Invictus is a celebration of the men and women who are about to ship on to begin their training, Launch Week not only provides an opportunity to celebrate our recent graduates, but also gives our active service members much needed recreational leave. Be sure to make a start today. For those with loved ones setting off today to begin their life in the Navy, stop by our friends and family to get a better understanding of what they have to look forward to in Naval service.
There you go. Ready to get to watch these slides? Welcome. Someone was asking about Levski, so I'll do this real quick. This is Levski. That borehole right there in the center, all of those are where the landing zones are. Those are where the hangars are. It used to be a mining facility, yeah. At AK, exclamation point PC or specs should give you what I'm using currently. You can tell this is old. It was done in the last CitizenCon. No, this is not in Stanton. This is in Nix. This borehole here has a bunch of like landing locations, and then all of these are docks and or exterior hangar, like as you can see here, exterior cargo elevators. So like this is what's going to happen. This is going to be put on every station in the future. No, Pulse's not docked. It's just parked right next to the to its location where it's unloading its resources. Not tomorrow or anything, but it's definitely in the cards. It's the next station system that's coming out. We don't know exactly when it's going to come out. I personally believe it's coming out towards the end of this year to into early next year. I think it's probably going to end up in a preview at the end of the year. So for those of you who've not been around, Nix used to be in game. It didn't look like this. It was very different, but Nix and not Nix, Levski was in game, which is where which on the asteroid of Delamar, which is where this was. Nyx is a system that's connected to Pyro, which is also connected to Castra. And Nyx itself is a on the edge of a dark nebula. So it's very difficult to scan and to kind of get any readings near the nebula. And it has a couple planets. None of them are inhabited or habitable. I think one of them's a gas giant, but there's 2 rocky planets. And so the only place you can go that has like extensive services is the asteroid of Delamar, which has got the settlement of Levski on it, which was settled by rebels from the Meser era. And they've sort of just continued to rebel against the UEE because they didn't see the change they wanted to after the Mesers collapsed. So they're mostly ineffectual. But the whole idea is they're sort of like a everyone let live situation. Let's not worry about each other too much. Let's not like cause too much harm. So they do actively police the system. They're kind of like a non-violent Pyro. They're still an outlaw faction. They're still an outlaw location, but they don't have nearly as much violence and blood. And they actively fight against that, in fact. Am I just slowing the uptake, or have people known and realized that only a small number of the hangars on stations and landing zones actually have hangars behind them? So here's the thing: all of them are supposed to, but the way that they've programmed it in terms of to work with server meshing is that it prioritizes very specific hangars. So those hangars are supposed to be functional, but if they can get away with only putting you in one hangar, they'll put you in one hangar. And that's one of the reasons why queue lines are so long sometimes, because there's supposed to be 13 hangars on a station, but there's only actually 3 that are working. Ice giant. There we go. I thought not a gas giant, ice giant. Nyx might change a little bit. I'm sure it will have more to do than just can't live here, it's bad. Mined out. They'll probably have more resources and such. They'll just probably be extreme worlds. I doubt they'll be habitable because there's no real reason to make them habitable. Because they already have Levski. They never had a landing zone in Pyro except for Ruin Station, and they sort of changed how they do landing zones since then. But now that they have Levski and they have, and Delamar, the main focus, they don't really need to have locations on the ground that would have some super important purpose. There'll still probably be outposts and mining outposts and stuff like that, but I doubt we're going to see them be super habitable because it's a smaller system and they don't really need to, since they already have that gameplay with Pyro and Stanton. Based on Pyro, all of this will change to add room for content. Not necessarily change dramatically. It's going to stay within lines of the themes of the system. But like all of that, like, coreless world, fully mined out, bad atmosphere, that's probably going to change. We'll probably have some planets which are like super, they're only going to be 2-3 planets. I don't think they're going to increase that. All right. Someone asked about Nyx. I know that it's been a while. Nyx was removed, or Levski, not Nyx, was removed in 2020. So it's been 5 years since it was in the game. Base building will make them habitable. Yeah, I think there'll be spaces for players to build bases. I think that's a great way of looking at it too. It's probably these are probably blank canvases because you don't need a land claim or anything. They're safer. That area is safer than Pyro is. It'll be a very Yep. Party. Good pen. Hey, super. They still have a lot of Black Ops asteroid bases, though. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more. There are only two factions that we know of in Nyx. The PLA, the People's Alliance of Levski, or PAL, the PALs, People Alliance of Levski, and the Moraine. And they're both similar. It's just the Moraine are kind of like a mafia mixed with a left-wing radical group. They want to overthrow the UEE, but like when you join the Moraine, it's like joining a family. Both the PAL and the Moraine are very anti-UEE, but like the Moraine are a lot more violent. The PAL sort of tolerates them, but they also know that they're probably causing problems. Is that the port where the Schwarmy shopkeeper? It's the port where the guy with the air traffic controller who's high all the time. Technically, all factions can have Black Ops bases in Nyx since they're off the book. Could allow for linked cross-system missions. They could.
Invictus launch week is a great opportunity to see your tactics at work. As members of the
Elson. Gotta love Elson.
to inspect the latest acquisitions of the UEE Navy. The latest line of defenders from Aegis Dynamics have already been battle-tested throughout the Empire and beyond. With that kind of success, it's no wonder that the Navy expanded their roster of Aegis ships in their fleet.
You need lunch? I do. I should probably actually get some.
For those with loved ones setting off today to begin their life in the Navy, stop by our friends and family to get a better understanding of what they have to look forward to in Navy service.
Levski's a nice place. It's complicated, but nice.
While fighters like the Hornet and Gladius have become synonymous with the UEE Navy, the truth is that with the variety of operations over the vastness of the Empire, the Navy utilized a variety of ships, including some models made for the private sector.
All right, we're going to get started here in about 10-ish minutes. At 45 to the hour.
For centuries, Invictus has been a time of friends and family.
UE owned or no? Nyx is not UE owned. No, it is independent. But considering the simplicity of Nyx, the real thing that needs to get added for Nyx to be important is scanning gameplay, which is something they're working on, which will probably be in before the end of the year. The bot broke? Shouldn't. Might not be connected.
UEE Navy small but elite group of vehicle operators trained for a variety of operations. For their combat search and rescue training, they are some of the
Oh, yeah, it did break. Give me a moment.
personnel who are invited to train with the Marines on the hostile environments of combat. Aegis Dynamics is committed to improving the pilot experience, more so than any other manufacturer. Their reps and engineers are a common fixture at the Academy and naval bases to try and get first-hand accounts of what works and what doesn't in their ships.
Well, it's working actually, so it should all work now. That sounds like the perfect setting for some spy games. It's definitely more clandestine. Nyx is the goddess of night, so maybe the goddess of sleep too.
Launch Week is a great opportunity to see your taxes at work. As members of the Empire, it's your right to inspect the latest acquisitions of the UEE Navy.
We're doing ship tours, sort of, floor tours for sure.
The UEE Navy is proud to welcome Aegis Dynamics back to Invictus Launch Week. Though they have created some of the most iconic and decorated naval ships in our history, their past was draped in shadow for decades. We are thrilled to see that they have truly committed themselves to building a brighter future. Though not nearly at the numbers that our UEE Army brethren order, the Navy maintains
I'm gonna go use the restroom, grab something to drink, and then we'll get started here in about 5 minutes.
transport or even exploration operations.
I'm gonna unmute myself in Discord. Yep. So I am on Discord to talk about this. After this, I'll be joining the league. We're gonna do kind of a private relic expedition. So league members only, basically. Well, perfectly willing to welcome to watch, but we do open ones where people who are not members can come join us for relic expeditions, but without all of our leadership here, because a lot of them are off doing work or family stuff, we're going to focus on the core crew. So, be right back.
For those with loved ones setting off today to begin their life in the Navy, stop by our friends and family to get a better understanding of what they have to look forward to in naval service.
Little light. It's Nyx is gonna have more was it something I said? Yes, Phantom. Specifically you.
But elite group of vehicle operators trained for
Nyx is gonna be more around it's got a dark nebula to it, so it's very hard to see.
who are invited to train with the Marines on the hostile environments of Corin.
No, you're not. You have to jump in on me because I don't think Tree's in the same server as I am.
Aegis Dynamics is committed to improving the pilot experience, more so than any other manufacturer. Their reps and engineers are a common fixture at the Academy and naval bases to try and get first-hand accounts of what works and what
Send me a friend request then.
their ships.
QPan, you can go jump on QPan as well. Need an average of just shy of 450K a day, beat funding for May of last year. already solidly in second place, having beaten 2022 already. And yeah, they have 4 days left. They made 1.2 mil last year or yesterday. With the Kraken being sold, they'll probably make something similar around that amount of money just in the next 2 days. And then the finale will always have a little bit of a bump, usually about $1 million. They'll probably make somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million a day for the next 4 days. So they'll probably be at 26, 27 mil. 7 days left? It ends on the 28th, though. Yeah, 27th. The finale is 26th to the 27th. So like 28th, which is Wednesday, is it ends on Tuesday.
Invictus launch week is a great opportunity to see your taxes at work.
No, the sale ends on the 28th.
It's your right to inspect the latest
I know what you're saying is that there's more days in May beyond the sale, but like I don't see them selling a ton of, like, their average is like 100K a day, 100 to 200K a day on non-sale days. It's really this yes, and like if they're gonna break their record, it's gonna break in the next couple of days. Not at like May 30th.
The latest line of defenders from Aegis Dynamics have already been battle tested throughout the Empire and beyond. With that kind of success,
A few more minutes because we do have one other person who's going to be here. When you get here, I'll kick out Rage Master because I don't think Rage Master just wants to be here. I'm gonna leave the party anyways. Jin's point is that like there's still a lot of time left. They're going to probably break it just because they don't have that pace. My point is that if they don't break it by the end of the sale, they won't break it. No, I didn't see that. Boomer Doomer 1998 subscribe. Thank you so much for that Twitch Prime sub. And Trader 961 resubscribed for 5 months. Thank you so much for that. Gin and Tonic as well. I don't have any of the notifications up, so. Poochie, thank you so much for that 13 months. Could you read the Drake statement from CIG website, please? Sure. Because a lot of people are going to ask this anyways. I'll get started with this. Ever been kicked out of a party you've never went to? Well, boo freaking who. Invictus corporate overlords. Let us wipe away our non-existent tears with our calloused hands and earn from an actual hard day's work. You can keep your pomp and shove your circumstance. We'll be back next year, bigger and badder. Then we'll see who's laughing. Yuck it up, naval lemmings and stim-snorting barons. While you still can. Drake fans know how to be patient. See you next year, workers. So yeah, Drake was kicked out. They weren't allowed in, and they didn't have a chance to. They weren't allowed to do Defense Con. They usually do. So what happened to Defense Con? They just weren't allowed to show up. Meta, they couldn't make it work, but they are planning on doing it again next year. So we'll see.
Line of defenders from Aegis Dynamics have already been battle tested throughout the Empire and beyond. With that kind of success, it's no wonder that the Navy expanded their roster of Aegis ships in their fleet.
Of course, they're too strong. No Defense Con. Yeah, there's some announcements that talked about it on the loudspeakers that said that they were like improving their reputation.
Much needed recreational leave. Be sure to thank Starnet today.
Honestly, what CIG should do in the future for these is they should make all of the floors available on day one. Now, of course, that requires them to actually build out those floors and then have them run, but have them all available day one so you can go to each floor and then you have like the new floor, and you got a bunch of other stuff like that. New floor, and then the each manufacturer's floor, and each styled in its own way. But of course, that also requires them to do dynamic mesh, because that's the only way that would function. All right, so I'll get us started here. Marking this down at about 50 minutes, so 49 minutes, so I can timestamp in there.
For centuries, Invictus has been a time for friends and family to come together and celebrate the pillars of duty, service, and civic pride.
All right. Welcome to the floor of Invictus 2955. My name is Paul Shelley, and this is the AstroHistorian. We're going to go through this and look at all of the ships on the floor of Invictus, talk a little bit about their histories and what they do to give you kind of a background of the information. Just as a kind of a side note, I am also going to be doing on my other channel, the Astropub Live, I have started a review channel where I break down the ships more comprehensively, a little bit of sweaty number crunching, a little bit of lore based in there, a little bit of vibes based feelings, just to kind of get the idea of what each ship is good for and why you should or shouldn't get it. It's their advantages and disadvantages. So if you like that, make sure you subscribe to that channel as well. Without any further ado, let's get started with the newest ships. Come on, join me. Let's walk. We're walking. Actually, let me cancel out the party. Go. Party. Follow me. Right. Lots of scared individuals here. So the Grey Cat MTC. So it's important to note that Grey Cat as an organization is not a military organization. They're founded on Mars in the early days of the UNE. In fact, they're founded before the UNE even existed, so before the Unification Wars and all that kind of stuff, as a mining accessories company. And they have evolved since then, their flagship product being the Pyro multi-tool, but they still focus heavily on mining and utility. So the MTC is sort of their military version of their utility vehicle lineup, which includes the STV, or what the community calls the Steve, the UTC, which we still haven't yet to see, and of course the PTV. So this is sort of the military version of that. This is their first foray into military vehicles. As you can see here, there are 2 suit lockers. There's weapon racks, multiple, internal components for the component base itself, a turret seat and the driver's seat, so it can hold 2 people. On the top here are twin size 2s, so much beefier guns. And in the back, they have these racks. So these racks hold 4 1/8 SU containers. Effectively, what this is a support tactical vehicle for infantry in the military. Obviously, it's probably going to be used by private security as well, but you can see maybe 1 or 2 of these be used alongside other... Close it. Used alongside infantry and maybe other support vehicles as well. This is released this year. Let's go over and talk about the Guardian. So Mirai has got a complicated history, but effectively Mirai stems from Misk's desire to create a racing brand. One of the early CEOs of Misk was really into racing and really pushed Misk into creating a racing team, and that would eventually lead to the creation of the Razor. And in the process of that was the dual agreement, the technological share agreement between Misk and Aopoa, which is a Xi'an company, effectively allowing for Misk to get some of the thruster technology that Aopoa developed in return for Misk giving them the rights to produce the whole C and the whole series of ships for the Xi'an. So with that technology and with Xi'an engineering aid, they created effectively the newest brand called Mirai, which is sort of their high performance brand, which includes more military style things. And this is the latest version of their Guardian platform, the MX. The Guardian is sort of more of a heavy fighter designed for hunting larger vessels, some bounty hunting, but it's mostly just a sort of a long-range heavy fighter. But the MX is unique because it's designed much more in line with being a heavy fighter for the military. There's been some rumors that the Guardian is going to be replacing the Vanguard, possibly. But this version does not have any long-term habitation. It's just components. It does have, weapons and a suit rack, so it does have a love for some of that. But generally speaking, it's mostly there just for guns. It comes with 4 size 4 weapons, and with this creation, it is well on the lines of becoming more commonplace to see even Xi'an-inspired designs in the UE Navy. All right, from that, let's go talk about Starlancer. We don't know a lot about why the Starlancer exists, but we do know, in fiction at least, but we do know that the TAC is designed around in response to things like the Militia Mobilization Initiative and the Civilian Defense Force. The Civilian Defense Force is an outgrowth of the Militia Mobilization Initiative, which created its own, a specific civilian branch of the advocacy, which is the UEE's version of the of like sort of federal police forces. And this job is a long-range patrol. The idea was to take the Starlancer platform and turn it into a long-range sort of mobile base for militia and frontier forces to sort of act as first response before the Navy can arrive to do any sort of support. It comes with heavy guns. These are size 5 guns on the side. It also comes with a drop bay of 8 seats, plus 2 guns mounted on the back. It has 2 missile pods on its back, controlled by the pilot, I believe, or co-pilot. So it's got extended amounts of guns. It still has the Starlancer main bay, where you can hold vehicles. And it has these 2 medical beds. So, tier 3, so they're not super good, but like they do help for emergency medical situations. Got the 2 side guns, and it's got the upstairs. It's got a special unique feature, but it has the typical suit locker sort of armory area. Got the crew quarters area. It kind of only has 8. Yeah, 8 beds in here, 4 on either side. And then the old crew area on the Max is replaced with a Fury bay. This is a bay specifically designed to hold a Fury. It can't hold really anything else other than a Fury as well. It has a little bit of a support there. But other than that, it's got its typical engineering bays and all of those wonderful things. Head down. As someone in chat is saying, it's the AC-130 of the UEE. Now, again, I do not believe this is actually designed to be used by the military, but by support elements of the military, so like the Civilian Defense Force, or the Bremen Defense Force and such. Though it may be used by the military, but there's no indications and lore that it is used by the military. Then we've got the Asgard. Yeah, local militias. The Asgard is an extension of the Valkyrie program. And while the Valkyrie is not on the floor, I can basically say that the Valkyrie program was designed after the creation of the... after the creation of the Hornet Mark I. When that was sold and did really well to the UE Navy, the Asgard, or the Valkyrie, was envisioned as a anticipatory ship. Basically, they spent time and they got a supercomputer. They took all the data they could find on the war with the Vandal and the war and military needs in general, and they dumped it all into a supercomputer. And the supercomputer spit out a predictive algorithm in terms of like what ships would be needed for the future of the UEE. And the Asgard became the Valkyrie became the main focus that the designers at Anvil would focus on, because one of the things that the predictive algorithm said was there would need to be some sort of tactical drop ship to be able to drop troops and some vehicles off on a planet to retake planets from the Vandal. So they designed, built, and tested the ship before the UE even asked for it, not knowing that around the same time they were producing this, the UEE came up with Starlift Command. They were studying, they found an old study from the late Meser era, which studied the First and Second Tavaran Wars to describe what went right and what went wrong in the war. And one of the big things that came out of that study was that the UEE lacked flexible tactical response options to invasion. Basically, planetary invasion is very different from, say, a typical sea-based invasion, in modern days, because you can sort of land anywhere on a planet. You create a lot of pockets of resistance. You can land in some areas and clear out a resistance, and then control that area. But there may be other areas which are have more heavy resistance. So being able to redeploy troops to those areas to take out those resistance was very important, especially with heavier vehicles. And they just didn't have the ships to do it. So in response to this study, they created Starlift Command, which is where the Hercules Starlifter comes from, but it's also the origin of the Valkyrie and the Asgard, because once they had said, hey, we've got this heavy lifter, we need a troop lifter, they created the Valkyrie, and obviously the Asgard is sort of an evolution of that design, where they said, well, we also need a smaller frame to be able to drop heavier equipment, but not necessarily troops. So it's sort of like an accompaniment to the Valkyrie, where you don't necessarily want to drop off an M2. Let's take a look at the Asgard itself. All right. So it only has a bathroom and bedrooms for 2 because it only has 2. Neat. It's a little. And it does have a cockpit. This cockpit is the same as, pretty much the same as the Valkyrie. It holds 6 size 3s. And then the bottom has basically seating for the crew of a tank. And then it has a turret gunner slash engineer, which goes here, which is size 4s on that bad boy. But it still has the side guns with side doors with side guns opening. So from the Asgard, let's go to the Hornet, and then we'll go in other directions. I'll wait for catch up here. Just as a reminder, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and hit the bell icon to be notified of its release. I will be doing new content when it comes to Star Citizen lore. I'm going to be doing a video on the Hurstons. I've got a video that's going to break down the sort of the economy and how the economy functions of the UEE. I have the complete history of all of the ships of the UEE Navy. I've got that last video to do. The complete history of Star Citizen Lore 5 is pretty much done. I'm just waiting to be able to pay my editor what I owe them so that we can release it. So it might be June or July. So we got a lot of content coming out. The way it's going to work is I'm going to be dropping off 2 videos a month starting next month, though I will be making 3 to 4 videos a month. And then the ones that will not be released will be released later. So like the 2 that I'm making in June that will be released in July, but they'll be available for Patreons and members well before everybody else. So if you want to get the most out of it, especially this summer, I'd suggest becoming a Patreon or a membership. But you can watch absolutely free. There's no charge for any of those. Mostly just trying to catch up with my own content. All right, the Hornet. The Hornet is important because it is sort of the beginnings of the modernization of the brand new UEE post-Mezzer era. Mezzers really only ever contracted with Aegis. They did contract with other companies, but it was very light. So Aegis was the only company that really built most of the vessels of the UEE for about 400 years. The new UEE, after the Mezzer era had ended, wanted to diversify a little bit, to have a little bit more than just one company, so that they wouldn't be beholden to one company's whims if something went wrong. So they have developed, they contracted RSI to do a lot of their larger ships, and a new up-and-coming manufacturer to do their smaller ships after the release of the Terrapin, which will, I think the Terrapin's in there. It's not. The Terrapin was the first vessel they created. It was very popular, and when the UEE went to go replace the aging Avenger, they tapped Anvil to create a new ship, which they created the Hornet. Now, the Hornet is important because it is one of the most successful ships in UEE history. It is a medium versatile fighter that basically can do anything you ask it to do. So as a result, it is very popular. Famously, Arya Reily, one of the commanders of Squadron 42, one of the most famous commanders of Squadron 42, and one of the most famous pilots of Squadron 42, said that the Hornet was like it's cursed. It's cursed to succeed. nothing can fail. Like, the only thing that fails with a pilot or with a Hornet is the pilot, not the ship. So the ship is very flexible in what it does. It's built to be both maneuverable and fast, so it can deal with, say, Xi'an or other faster threats, but it's also still got design built around the idea of more tanky, a lot of big, heavier firepower, and still has some sloping ends to it. You can see here these slopes, which are characteristic of anti-Vanduul design. Because Vanduul like their melee attacks to come in and hit, so sloping or angled panels can help deflect the blows. And also heavy firepower helps chew through their armor because they're usually pretty heavily armored. All right. So, and this is the F-7C Mark II, the F-7CM Mark II, or the Super Hornet. In the 2940s, they decided to revamp the lineup after they had built the F-7 or the F-8A series, and they created the F-7A Mark II, which was sort of everything they learned over the years. That also became a civilian version because there was also a civilian version that they built in the early 30th century because Drake was very popular amongst local militia, and the UEE was uncomfortable with Drake having so much control of the militia market. So when Anvil basically said, hey, we kind of want to sell a civilian version of the Hornet, the UEE said, yes, please. Please do that. We don't want people to use Drake because the UEE does not get along with Drake. All right, with that, let's move on to the next series. Speaking of the Hornet, here is the successor, the F-8A. So the F-8A and the F-8C are slightly different. There are more guns on the F-8A, as you can see, but they tend to be larger. Or I think there's actually less guns. There's 6 guns. There's 7 guns. 8 total guns on the on here, but it's usually higher caliber. I'm not going to bother trying to tell you the exact sizes because I don't usually memorize those. I usually look those up when I do any of these sorts of reviews. The point being that the design itself, as you can see, is typical anti-Vanduul technology. We've got these sloping armor pieces here, and it's heavy. It's got a lot of firepower, but it's still just like the F-7C, like the Hornet. It is the Lightning is very maneuverable for its size. It's one of the more maneuverable heavy fighters, especially the F-8A. So this ship is replacing most of the older ships, including the Gladius and the Vanguard and the Hornet, though it's not replacing everything. There are other ships that are still kind of in service, especially the Hornet with its Mark II variant, and the Gladius, which is slowly being phased out, plus also new ships like the Hawk existing. And all right, move on to Event Hall 3. All right, we're going to start with the Vanguard Harbinger. So the Vanguard series is an interesting creation because it's part of the second wave of UEE vessels, of Aegis vessels for the UEE Navy. Aegis was founded specifically to build ships for the Navy, and so its pivot towards civilian market as of late is an aberration. It was sort of like a big leap of faith that they had to do after after the disastrous consequences of the end of the Mezer era basically kicked them out of all of their contracts. But the Vanguard was built. It's probably the first ship that was built specifically with the Vanduul in mind. Let me look up my notes exactly when it was built. I think it was in the 2700s. have the date on here, but I want to say it was like 2730s. Might be wrong on this one. These are more. Let me do Yeah, all right. 2737. So I was close. So 2737, this is the A3G Vanguard, Aegis Heavy Fighter. The thing about this was it was built around the idea of dealing with the Vanduul, but also with longer ranges. Because one of the biggest problems that the UE was facing, especially at that time, was they were heavily reliant on these large fleets. And while they had become this, what I call the nimble doctrine, where you start to see, or hybrid doctrine, where you start to see like fighters take over a lot of a much heavier role in the defense of the UEE, the most of the power that was dealing with the Vanduul was locked up in these massive fleets with huge battleships and carriers and cruisers, which were too heavy to actually deal with the Vanduul, because the Vanduul's ships are much more maneuverable than the UEE ships, especially the capital ships. So, at least at the time. So the Vanguard was built as this idea of, let's take the chunky defensiveness that you need to deal with the Vanduul and the firepower, but combine it with range. So the Vanguard was designed as sort of a long-range exploration frontier defense fighter. And the thing that made the A3G very unique is that the Vanguard actually has 4 different versions. Each of those versions can be swapped out for the other. So, in this case, right down here, you see the latch systems here, where it says keep clear while doors operational. These latch systems can unlatch and drop down this middle section. In this case, this is the Harbingers. This is the bomber variant of it. And as you can see, it comes with, I believe, 3 size 5 torpedoes on it. I love that with love. But there's also the Warden, which has swaps this out for sort of a living quarters so that you can live, go longer ranges. There's the Spartan, which has, the Hoplite, which has the different seats. I think it's 6 seats inside of it. And then there's the Sentinel, which swaps out this whole area for a e-warfare suite for Wild Weasel runs and such. So while the Navy really loves these, the Marines really love these things, because they basically have one vessel, one ship, which can be turned into 4 different ships: a troop transport, a e-warfare suite, e-warfare ship, a heavy fighter, and a bomber. So a fighter bomber. So yeah, that's the Vanguard. Project Monitor. This is the first ship ever developed by Aegis, or by Anvil Aerospace. I know it's Aegis, but Project Monitor was headed by a junior developer, a junior ship designer named Jude Harris Arnold, who would go on to found Anvil Aerospace. And his failures in this project directly led to him founding Anvil Aerospace, because his version, there were 3 different prototypes that were created. His prototype never made it past the jump tunnel stage. It made it past, it was built, but then it's had problems with its quantum drive, so it was never fully created. And so, because he failed in the project, he reached out to his superiors at Aegis and said, can I get some feedback? What did I do wrong? How can I improve? And they just told him, they just kind of brushed him off and told him just do better. So he didn't like that, and eventually left Aegis because of that to found his own company named Anvil Aerospace, inspired by an older company called Case Aerospace, which created the Hurricane, which I think is on the floor, so we'll get to that point. But this is important because this is sort of one of the first ships which was directly built off of the idea of what would become Anvil Aerospace. Now, Project Monitor is important also because at the end of the Meser era, there was a big problem with Vanduul. They were trying to deal with the Vanduul, and one of the biggest problems was the Vanduul were heavily and are heavily reliant on fighters and bombers, as well as torpedoes to deal with a lot of damage. So they needed some sort of ship that could act as a forward screen and a picket for the fleet, as well as act as sort of a patrol ship. And they had a ship that was doing that role called the Gwyn class, but the Gwyn class was a converted collier, so it was a converted cargo ship. It was never designed to be that role. So they wanted a ship that was designed specifically with the role of dealing with these problems. And that became Project Monitor, which eventually became the Hammerhead. Now the Hammerhead has bristlings, size 4s, I believe. So like there are 6 quad size 4 turrets on this thing. Plus the pilot and co-pilot have access to a bunch of different missiles here at the front as well. And it has its own living quarters. It has cargo bay. This is the place where you can go into the bridge. These are the living quarters, cargo bay, engines. This is the ramp through the back turret. This is sort of the engineering room. Glass used to be used to be able to see through that glass. Mess hall with storage bay in the back. This takes you down to the front desk, first floor. Captain's quarters with bed. And then there's the bridge, cargo area. Jump down here. All right. It's gone on to do a lot of cool things the Hammerhead has. The one funny thing that is always fun to me is that in lore, it's almost canonical that Hammerhead pilots are insane because they consistently throw themselves in front of bigger targets to try to take them down, to a point where I think it's probably become an unintentional story decision to do so. All right. So, for those of you who are in the know, I hate the ship. I hate it with fire passion. Lots of different reasons. One of the reasons is because this ship is fundamentally doesn't make any sense. Its lore is contradictory at best. When we do have lore, in some cases it's referred to as far back as pre-Mezzer era, or like around the Mezzer era. In some cases, it's referred to as it was built in the 2940s. So we don't know when it was built. We do know that it has, it's a gunship. We know it has these engines are called, unique engines are called the vector lock engines. They're designed to be more efficient or allow for like hovering, which they don't currently do. It also has some options for drops, to be a drop ship, because I'm not gonna go all the way up there, but on the top, it's got 4 seats for drop seats. And then down here you have the bed for 4 different crew members, 1 for each gunner plus the pilot. It's a very weird ship, weirdly designed ship. Yeah, I can't really talk about much other than that. It's one of the reasons I don't like it. I did do a video where I gave it a speculative fan lore of where it came from and how it came to be, but Yeah, basically it was one, the actual history behind it was part of a contest. And that contest itself was about creating, it's called the Next Great Starship. It was really mostly about, the contest was mostly about CIG trying to hire people who know how to work with the Star Engine. In fact, Elwyn, I hope Elwyn still works there, but Elwyn, last I heard, last I heard he was. Elwyn was hired because of that contest. And Elwyn is now one of the lead ship designers for North American ship team for Star Citizen. So he's a good example of like people came in for us. All right, let's move on to Hull 4. Yeah, there's a lot of issues I have with that, it not being an Aegis design. There are ways you can write around that, and I think it really depends on what CIG wants to do with it, because I don't think even CIG knows what they want to do with that ship yet. So. The ground hall. Oh, also, this is just one of those little facts, little fun facts. You'll hear them say the systems, because that's the official name of the UEE, how the UEE refers to itself. It is obviously the United Empire of Earth, but the systems of the United Empire of Earth, or just simply the systems. It's been a constant sort of refrain throughout most of Star Citizen's lore. While we, the fans, call it the verse, that's sort of more of like, unofficially, people call it the verse, but when you see it in official documents, they call them the systems. So, all right, the Atlas chassis. So each of these ships is based off of the same chassis, which is a vehicle that does not exist anymore, but it was called the Anvil Atlas. And the Anvil Atlas was designed in a time period when there was a lack of new vehicle manufacturers in the UEE, but there was a demand and a need for a vehicle that could double as an anti-air platform. So the Anvil Atlas was built in the mid 28th century, I think. Mid 29th century. And it did okay, but it only served for a couple of years, and then it was retired and then replaced with other vehicles and ships. But when there was a demand for its services again, the Atlas itself was a ballistic anti-aircraft cannon platform. But they found out that it had its limitations because you had to constantly keep it fueled up, and it was just there's some issues. But when they needed a anti-missile or a missile-based anti-aircraft platform, Anvil was called back, and they kind of re-looked at their design for the Atlas. They took the same chassis, and then out of that chassis they built the Ballista. The Ballista is the oldest of the Atlas chassis that are still in service, and it was built effectively as an evolution of the Atlas. Since then, they built the Centurion, which is this over here, which sort of takes the role of what the Atlas was originally and turns it into the more laser-based rather than ballistic-based. And then after that, they built the Spartan. And the Spartan is sort of a troop transport version of the same chassis. But these are all built on the same chassis. It's probably better to call it the Ballista chassis because the Ballista really is an evolution of the Atlas chassis. But, it is what it is. Right. The Ursa. We're going to really talk a little bit, not too much about the Ursa because the Ursa is, there's not a lot of lore behind it, honestly, but the Ursa was built specifically off of a marine vehicle, a marine assault vehicle, which they kind of modified into the Ursa, which was designed as exploration and kind of support. This is the medical Ursa, which is the medevac, which is sort of a medical version of the Ursa. As you can see in here, it has a place where you can lay down and get medical assistance. It also has a regen bed on it because it has its own Ibram sphere. It also has its own. This is actually what's called a auto dock. Auto docks were first built by Bioticorp. Build up here a little bit. A little bit of IV too. So these are effectively automated medical systems designed specifically to deal with remote areas where you don't necessarily have medical expertise easily available. They first became standard on the Cutlass Red. It was the first ship to actually incorporate them, and since then, pretty much every vehicle that has had a medical purpose has adopted an auto dock as part of their system. All right, we've already talked about the what is this? The Asgard, and we'll talk about the Novas here in a moment. All right, let's take a look at the DX-20. The DX-20, also known as the Cyclone, was the first vehicle ever built by Tumbril. Now, Tumbril is a company that exists because a husband and wife team wanted to recapture the spark of their marriage, where they originally fell in love. They were bored by the jobs they were doing because they were doing some corporate jobs, and because of the passing of the wife's parents, they decided to take that as a way of trying to do something different, because they met and fell in love because of a vehicle called the Land Cruiser, which was no longer in production at the time, and it was used mostly by remote places for as a vehicle to kind of where you couldn't afford a ship, or it was too dangerous to fly a ship. And in an incident that her parents saved his mother from a sandstorm, using the Land Cruiser sort of brought them together to work on that Land Cruiser, and eventually that Land Cruiser became the impetus for them to start Tumbril. And this was their first vehicle, called the DX-20. Didn't sell very well because obviously who needs a car in the area in the era of spaceships? But this vehicle was built in the late 29 or 2530s. And so when the First Tavaran War broke out and the UEE or UPE army at the time was desperately looking for vehicles to support their ground operations, they found out that the only vehicle that was even remotely capable of dealing with the things that they needed to deal with was the DX-20. So they hired Tumbril to create the military version of it, which was named the Cyclone. And this is probably the closest version of the original DX-20 built for military. This is called the TR. It has a pilot or a driver and a passenger, and then it also has a integrated ballistic cannon on the top. Now, I've heard rumor that this cannon can be swapped out for an energy weapon, but I don't know about it. I think it's a TS size 1. But there's also other versions over here, like that's the what is that? Next, no. Cyclone MT, sort of an anti-tank version with a heavier cannon plus rockets and missiles built into it. Now, the Cyclone was super popular during the First Tavaran War and the Second Tavaran War. However, the Second Tavaran War also required some evolution of this armored doctrine. As far as we know, there were really no tanks in the Star Citizen universe until the Nova was introduced. There may have been tanks in the past, like in our history, but the Nova itself was sort of the return to that idea with at that time, 27th century technology. And while the Nova was being built, they also built the Storm. So both of these vehicles were built around the same time during the Second Tavaran. The Nova being famous for the Battle of Corin Pass, where 3 of them held off an entire Tavaran invasion force. And of course, the Storm is famous for being bad and poorly designed because you enter through the front, which is way great way of getting yourself killed. But in all seriousness, it was designed as backline. It was designed to go into the back lines and attack artillery, but to be a little bit faster and more maneuverable than Nova and only require one operator, whereas Nova requires 3. A driver, a passenger, or co-pilot, and a gunner. So, that is the ground vehicles. Let's move on to the fighters and other large ships. Wait, so he said the Land Cruiser? Well, it was Land Cruiser, but it wasn't the Land Cruiser, Toyota Land Cruiser. It was called the Land Cruiser. I think it was called like the Land Cruiser 2000 or something like that. But it was made by a company called Land Cruiser. Do you think we'll see a lot of older ships in some way from the game, like the Longsword, etc.? Probably not. All right. So, the actual name for this thing, because I actually was able to find it before it got removed from the internet. The N6G Avenger. So this was the premier medium carrier fighter of the Mezzer era. It served admirably from 2760 to 2792. Very short lifespan in comparison. There do seem to be some Avengers still in service with the military, especially the 2-seater trainer version. But in general, the Avenger is no longer actively used by the UEE Navy, but it is actively used by the Advocacy, because one of the things that was unique about the Avenger was that it has a cargo bay, so it can actually carry cargo in the back. And when you pull the second seat out of the Avenger, which the original Navy Avenger may have been a 2-seater, but when you pull the second seat out, it leaves space for a living quarters. So the Advocacy purchased most of the surplus Avengers after the Hornet had replaced the Avengers and effectively used them for their own purposes. They became great patrol ships. While they are carrier fighters, so they do have a limited range, they still have a lot of flexibility with their cargo and their sleeping quarters. So it still continues today to be used by Advocacy and bounty hunters alike, as well as one of the best starter ships in the game, honestly. You get one of these, it's great. Go over to Hall 1, and then go to Hall 2, and we'll wrap this up. The Fighter Hall. Is this the MX or is this just the regular Guardian? Just the regular. Okay. I'm not going to go over the regular Guardian because we already kind of talked about that. But let's talk a little bit about the Arrow. So the Gladius is a very, very old ship. And we'll talk about that here in a moment because it's a little bit further down. But because even though it's still pretty useful, its age is starting to show. So the UE started to rotate out Gladiuses for Arrows. And the Arrow sort of is built with the lessons learned from the Gladius. It's not quite as good at the Gladius in some places. I think it's more maneuverable, but it either sacrifices maneuverability or speed compared to the Gladius, but it's also got a much smaller footprint than the Gladius. And while it also has slightly less guns, it only has 2 size 1s instead of a 4 size or 3 size 3s. I think technically the Gladius has a size 4 mount on the front now. It does have less firepower, but for its smaller size and its slight advantage in either maneuverability or speed, can't remember one, it has seen as a very good successor because it still keeps the same ideas while also incorporating, as you can see, sloped lines, so you have a little bit better for dealing with Vanduul, and it's just better in terms of its modernity. more compact. Right. We've already talked about the F8A, but this is the F8C, just the civilian version. Most Anvil ships now have a civilian version that come out, and so this is sort of the civilian version of that modern Lightning chassis. Has less, I think it has the same amount of guns. It may actually have more guns. The same amount of guns, but just size lower. So it's like, these are like size 2s and size 3s, and I think the F8A has size 3s and size 4s. Aren't you in the Navy? What are you worried about? All right. Whoa. This is the RSI Scorpius, aka the Black Widow. We don't know a lot about the Scorpius because the Scorpius was just sort of shows up in the 2940s. But it has been said that it was tested by the Navy, by the 999th Squadron, and the CDF, and the BDF. So the Bremen Defense Force, the Civilian Defense Force, the 999th, and the UE Navy all used and utilized this before it was sold to the public. Now, I don't know if this meant that it was used as like a Navy vessel, like it was officially adopted into service, or RSI managed to like wiggle their way into getting the UEE to use some of these for their promotional or to help them test it, because RSI does have a very close working relationship with the UEE and the Navy, so they might be able to, bend some arms a couple ways and get a couple of squadrons equipped with these just for testing purposes. But it is likely that this ship is the evolution of what we know as the Black Widow. So when the F8A was first introduced, it was going up in competition against two other ships, Aegis's Dogfighter 3000 and RSI's Black Widow. Now, these were supposed to be heavier ships designed to replace the aging Hornet, and I believe that both this and the Black Widow and the Dogfighter 3000 are actually in game. This is the evolution of the Black Widow, which we now know as the Scorpius, and the Dogfighter 3000 became what we know as the Aegis Saber. So this is a two-seater fighter. It's a heavy fighter. Basically, the pilot and the gunner have the same amount and same number of weapons. So it's a very devastating amount of firepower, plus missiles that it can be used. It fits into a nice, slim, compact nature, but it also has these X's that these S foils that pop out when combat. Is totally not a Star Citizen's version of the X-Wing. But yeah, it's been around only a couple years now. I think probably about 10 years at max, probably more like 5 or 6. So yeah, it's the Scorpius. The oldest ship in the Navy, the Gladius. Well, not technically. The oldest ship is still the Perseus, but the second oldest ship, the oldest fighter in the Navy. The Gladius was first built in 2570, I want to say. Oh, do I not have the Gladius on here? I do. 2579. This is the predecessor to all of the modern fighters. This represents a quantum leap in technology compared to previous generations of ships in the lore. This was the first ship to use civilian-style modular design. So instead of having a pre-built bespoke engine and shield generator and coolers, this was built with the idea of being able to utilize civilian modular power plants and energy shields. And it was also built using the most latest technology derived from the Tavaran shield technology, which had devastated the UE during the First Tavaran War. Effectively, this ship is built as a human version of the Talon, as a human's response to the Talon. So this ship itself is designed to be maneuverable, fast, have plenty of firepower, but also small enough to fit into most carriers. And the smallest carrier of the fleet at the time was the Idris, the Aegis Idris frigate. So the frigate, the size of the Idris's cargo or hangar bay, directly has impacted the development of this ship, which directly impacted the development of every other ship in the UEE, because every fighter can trace its origin back to this ship. This is the first modern fighter, like I said, quantum leap in evolution, but it is also very old. This is the 7th generation of this ship over the course of, let me see, look at the time, close to 500 years, almost 400 years of service. 2579 would be 2679 would be 100, 2779 would be 200, 2879 would be 300. So yeah, it's less than 400 because it's 2955. But still, well over 3 centuries old. And it's being phased out. It's no longer being utilized by the Navy. It's sort of being relegated to home guard because they just have so many parts for these things laying around that they're easy to replace, easy to fix. But everyone from mercenaries to pirates use these things. They're pretty common. What are the ships we fly in Squadron 42? This one. This is the ship you'll be flying in Squadron 42. This is the main ship you're flying in Squadron 42. I don't know if you'll be flying the Hornet, but the Hornet is also available. We see it in the trailers. All right. With that, let's move on to the last haul and call it a day. Many people have asked in the past, like, well, why does the UE Navy use ships that old, like the Gladius? And the answer is the same reason why the U.S. Air Force uses the F-15, which was built in the 1970s. In fact, I believe that the date of this creation, 2579, is probably is directly responded to, is probably directly correlated to 1979. I'd have to look that up to see if the F-15 was built in the 1979, but it's the F-15 is what it is. It's supposed to be the F-15. And like the F-15, it constantly gets dragged back out into into service because it just gets internal upgrades and because the frame still functions. It still works great. Still, there's no plane that can beat it. So why not? All right, the king of cargo, the backbone of the UEE logistics fleet, the MPUV. So, the story of the MPUV starts with the Argo OUC. So the OUC, or the Orbital Utility Craft, was built by Argo because before this, they were mainly a train company. They produced trains, train cars, and they operated a lot of those trains as well. So, mostly maglev. And the goal of these ships was to speed up logistics chains, because they were so good at building trains that were so super efficient that they were cheaper to use but as fast as orbital shuttles, that they would arrive in space yards to unload their cargo. And the slow part was getting the cargo unloaded so that the trains could continue on to their further destinations. So the things that were slowing the trains down was actually how fast the dock workers, the longshoremen, could actually remove the cargo from the trains and then begin to load them onto spacecraft or onto other craft that would then take it up to space stations. So they built a struggling ship manufacturer and had them develop a shuttle called the Orbital Utility Craft, the OUC. And that's when it became Argo Astronautics. And they used the OUC effectively to speed up the process, because the OUC was built to just basically hover down, snag the cargo off of the train, and immediately fly it up to the station where it would be loaded. So it was built around the idea of speeding up logistics to try to make things move faster and only require one person to do the whole thing. What they didn't realize is that the OUC became used for everything. People modified their OUCs to become search and rescue vessels, to become racing ships, to become transportation ships, so they could like weld it on like a little habitat, so people could like walk around inside of it, or they could take them around. They were all like extending the life of the OUC, because once civilian logistics kind of caught up with what was going on, they stopped making the OUC. People were still buying used OUCs and extending them to exist much beyond their original intention. So they're like, all right, we have a market that wants this. So they developed the multi-purpose utility vehicle, aka the Argo MPUV, our short king, long may he reign. And it is basically the standard vehicle. This is the standard vehicle on every station, every spaceport, and every UEE capital ship. The frigate, the Aegis frigate, literally has a space for the latest versions of the frigate have a bay specifically for the MPUV. It's designed for the MPUV. Unfortunately, currently in game, the MPUV doesn't fit in it, because in Squadron 42, the MPUV literally is attached to the ceiling of that, so it sort of hangs down over the bay, and then when the bay opens up and they unattach and they fly away, so it doesn't actually fit inside of it yet. This is still the ship that most people learn to fly in, because it's super reliable. It's super like forgiving. So you flip this thing over, it's really easy to flip it back over. It has a ton of hydrogen. It's like its components are pretty simple. I think most of its components are in the back. Might be inside in the front right here too. There's life support. Yeah. I think this is all of the components just right here in the back. So, there's personal storage on it now too. And this is the tractor version, which specifically has 2 tractor beams attached to it. But it's probably the most superior version. It's probably got a trap dusting version. Honestly, there is a rescue version of the MPUV that exists. It has a medical bay. All right, the Mantis. So the Mantis is what's known as a quantum enforcement vehicle. It's designed to trick other ships' quantum drives from activating. We don't know exactly how it works. There's no lore specifically on how it functions. Though there has been floated the idea that what this does is effectively mimic a massive gravitational body, which all quantum drives have a safety device built in, so you don't quantum through a planet. Which, I'm sure a lot of people in game would love to have that. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but I remember those like fondly, not so fondly. But it's designed to cancel and to pull the quantum bubble if the quantum drive detects that there's a massive gravitational anomaly nearby, which it will always assume is a ship, or not ship, a planet. So this may have something to do to trick that, and it also effectively collapses quantum fields if you try to form them, which the quantum entanglement, which prevents it from. We don't know a lot about the Mantis, but we do know it's used by the Navy, especially for like blockade and other missions. And it's also used by advocacy and by pirates, honestly. All right, let's go over to the Pisces. So this is the medical version of the Pisces, but the Pisces itself is designed as a shuttle for the exploration Carrack. So the Carrack itself was built in response to a big tragedy that was covered up when the Navy was using large capital ships as exploration ships. There was always a controversy in the Navy, especially amongst the high command, where they were like, do we want to use military combat vessels as exploration ships? Or do we want to build our own exploration ships? Because the Navy does have a lot of value in exploration. Pathfinding, updating maps, scanning anomalies, which all could be leading to things like jump points, which could lead to backdoors into systems. So they needed some sort of patrol. They needed still to do a lot of patrolling and scanning for scientific purposes, but they didn't have a scientific ship. So during a scientific expedition, a cruiser was investigating an anomaly, and in the process, because the crew was untrained for this anomaly and for other issues, the ship was destroyed and all crew was killed. And in response to this, the Navy greenlit a program, covered up the whole incident, greenlit a program for the Carrack, which would become the Carrack. And that's one of the reasons why the Carrack was classified for so long and wasn't able to be released, because it was, if you found out why the Carrack existed, you discover that it was directly related to the deaths of hundreds of starmen and an entire cruiser, to basically the Navy brass being bad at their jobs. So part of that system was they needed some sort of way of going to planet, if they needed to go to a planet, or scouting ahead. They needed a ship that was small enough to fit on the Carrack, but could also act as a scout, which became the Pisces. With the proliferation of the auto dock in the UEE, we have the creation of the Pisces R, the Pisces Rescue. Similar to the Ursa, the medical Ursa, the NURSA. As you can see, it has its own auto dock and Ibrahim sphere. It also has a pilot, and it also has a seat for the co-pilot, or for the nurse, or for the paramedic to function. All right, now let's go all the way back. Speaking of all this, talk about the Terrapin. I knew there was a Terrapin here. Totally not a Starfleet shuttle. All right, so the Terrapin, which is another name for turtle.
Everybody from the Paradigm down is
This is the earliest ship that we still have in game of Anvil Aerospace. This was built in the mid 2790s, and this stems from an issue that the Navy was having at the time, where once the Meser era had ended, the new UEE was very hesitant to have large budgets for the military, especially when the military still had lots of pro-Meser sympathies inside of it. So as the Navy was going through a reorganization, purging loyal Meser loyalist officers and crew, they needed a ship that could do the job of larger ships that would require less crew, but could still be, ferried aboard a carrier. So the Terrapin was the idea, the brainchild of one of the designers of Anvil Aerospace and Jude Harris Arnold, the founder, which was the idea to create basically an armored scout which could fit on board a Idris. And this does fit on an Idris. Now, by creating an armored scout, because they could basically fly into an area, get attacked, and still escape, they, by creating this, they, that's a fair. By creating this, they accidentally created a problem. This armor flap right here is over their coolers. Now, because of the way the ship was built, the armor flap would actually prevent the coolers from functioning at 100%. So the cooler would overheat, but the armor flap would also insulate the heat so it wasn't radiating out. So the infrared signature of a Terrapin was actually much lower than it should be because of its armor. And as a result, they installed these flaps like that are designed to go into atmosphere. You pop that up and then let the cooler air in. So like the cool off the coolers so that you can continue to fly. The Terrapin pilots call it going up for air, when they hit to a planet with an atmosphere and they open it up so that the atmosphere can help wick away the heat. So it's sort of stealth. It's not designed to be stealth, it's accidentally stealth. But it was such a popular design that it actually got Anvil the design the rights to produce the medium fighter we know as the Hornet. So this is sort of the ship that allowed Anvil to build the Hornet. And also, Terrapins began to be used multiple different ways. There's the version, which is the basic version, which has a scanner dish on it, which is used by a 2-man crew. And then there's this, which is the rescue, the medical. I think it's like called the medic. Yeah, Terrapin medic, which was another lore ship that they actually brought in, which has a size 2 medical bed. So it's actually slightly, or tier 2 medical bed, so slightly more advanced than most. Ibram sphere and everything else like that. And it also has a seat for a paramedic, similar to the similar to the other Anvil medical ship, the Pisces. But yeah, it's a pretty beloved ship. I think it's kind of got a mixed features, because a lot of people don't like this ship because it's like, well, it's super expensive compared to what it does. But I know it's got kind of a cult following. It's always had a cult following. There's also another version in lore, which we haven't seen, which is the dropship version, which was used by the Marines. So they would kind of rip everything out and put like line the walls with drop like seats. So it'd be like 3 to 4 drop seats that could be deployed. Let's head back to the very front there, because we don't really need to go to the bottom area, because that's just got a Cyclone and a Urso. We've already talked about. That is interesting. Terrapin is apparently derived from the Algonquin word for turtle. Yep. That literally means turtle. An unintentionally low emission vessel, but not designed for stealth. But yeah. Is there any lore in the suits like the ATLS or the Virgil Zeus system, or what necessitated the need to have those built by any chance? Not as of the moment. The best we can understand is that likely the suits were built for industrial purposes first. Likely lifting heavy objects, that sort of thing. Because you got to remember that power generation was not as efficient always, especially in the early days of the UEE, or early days of UPE, UNE, UPE, and UE. Shields were, for instance, super like power reliant, and smaller vessels just didn't have them. So and we don't know how old, they're called Titan suits. We don't know how old the Titan suits actually are. If I'm correct, and they're pretty old, they may represent sort of a proto hand tractor beam device, effectively, because they're designed to be tractor beams or mining lasers before you could man portable those systems. So they existed as sort of a heavy industrial version without having to utilize heavy equipment, which is difficult to get into tight spaces. And the reliance of mining in the early lore, there's a lot of mining that goes on. I could see it as being sort of like what we see as the Geo is sort of the origin of a lot of, it's sort of like the latest evolution of a long line of exoskeleton suits designed for that sort of thing. Because it is mentioned that the Zeus system was built as sort of a response to the Vanduul. So it was sort of we have this technology, let's build this for combat. So Virgil may have been the first people to say, we can put guns on this thing and actually function. Do you think we will get an actual medical version of the Atlas? Probably not. Does Pisces exploration have a bed and does it work like the Expedition roll, similar to the Cutter Rambler? The Pisces Expedition does not have a bed, but I believe it just has more guns. There's like 4 guns. It's effectively an Aurora without a bed. I think it has 4 SCU of cargo space, maybe less. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll be good for another 15, 20 minutes. And then we'll be moving over to the Lore Expedition. 5 SCU. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty small. Bigger than most of the starter ships, but not by much. It's 4. Okay, so that's the same amount as the Mustang Alpha. The C8R doesn't have 2 more guns. That's the C8X has 2 more guns. C8R just has the medical. All right. If you have any lore questions about anything else, let me know. Yeah, that's the standard starters for SCU. And then, you know, you get the Titan, which is 6 SCU. And then you have the true advanced starter, which is the 315P, which has 12 SCU.
The latest line of defenders from Aegis Dynamics have already been battle tested throughout the Empire and beyond. With that kind of success, it's no wonder they've expanded their roster of Aegis ships indefinitely.
I do want to thank everybody who's been subscribing as well. Gin and Tonic for that 67 months. Poochie for that 6 months. Raider 961.
Though not nearly as numbers of UEE Army Brethren Order, the Navy maintains an active, versatile fleet of ground units as well, whether for logistics, transport, or even exploration operations.
Unrelated to the C8, hear me out on a medical Hercules. You gotta take that up with the with Crusader, not for me. Just replace the cargo bay with like a tier 1 medical facility.
Aegis Dynamics is committed to improving the pilot experience, more so than any other manufacturer. Their reps and engineers are a common fixture at the Academy of Naval Bases, trying to get first-hand accounts of what works and what doesn't in their ships.
Will all capitals like the Idris have tier 1 medical area? I believe beyond the Polaris. The Polaris doesn't have a tier 1. I think it has tier 2. But yes, I think Frigate and up all have tier 1s. I do believe that the Idris has a tier 1 medical. In fact, I believe that the Idris is the first ship in game to have a tier 1 medical bed on it, because up to this point tier 1 medical beds were only for stations. I do believe that they're supposed to have tier 1. I don't know if they are. Question, any news on the Drake Dragonfly compact mode? Like where it would go into storage mode? Do I remember that correctly? It was planned. It was originally, the animations were there. Go to the office while we take these questions. Yeah, I remember the freelancers supposed to have rotating engines. By the way, if you join this, we're going to be streaming, maybe not once a week, but once every other week on Mondays from the AstroHistorian. Talking about lore of Star Citizen. We'll talk about lore of other franchises as well. So usually around 6 p.m. I don't know, 8 p.m. Eastern. I might do it a little earlier, especially for this summer because I've got the summer off because I'm a teacher. But I don't know if I can continue that. So we'll see. And of course, the Endeavor Hope. Yes, but the Endeavor Hope is a post 1.0 release, so it's going to be a while. Yes, I will be doing my like an 8-hour plus. So it's 8 hours to start, but it can go up to 18 hours stream tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing Plug and Play Star Citizen, and we're going to be giving away some stuff. Like we'll be giving away an MTC. I also have a Asgard. So if we reach our maximum quantity, we'll be giving away an Asgard and a bunch of other stuff like that. I did enjoy your Starfield lore series. I do want to get back to that at some point. I just haven't actually beaten the game. This is like 100 hours, but I do know how it ends, but I got like barely through the beginning quest because that's the game. Cutter would make an excellent food truck. I agree. Cutter ramen. Do you happen to know what's holding up the whole B development? Yes, interest. The difference between the whole A and the whole B is nothing. It's the number of spindles. Basically, the whole B is just a whole A with extra spindles. Similar to the D and E. The whole D and E are just a whole C with extra spindles. So they're sort of slightly bigger in some cases, but there's really no need for a whole D or an E. And of course, there's no need for a whole B. So it's one of those ships that's likely going to get put into game when they're done with other ships that are more important. So if you want to make noise, if you want a whole B, you got to make noise enough for CIG to start making a priority, because it's just not a priority. I bought the Freelancer when you entered from the bottom landing gear. I did too. That was my first. I remember that. Yeah, that's the other thing, is that the D and E, for instance, there's no reason to have them right now. Maybe when crafting and base building is fully in, but where's Drake and Invictus? They were kicked out. Drake was never supposed to be part of Invictus because they always created what was called a DrakeCon or DefenseCon, which happened after Invictus. But this year they weren't allowed to do a DefenseCon at Area 18 because Area 18 kicked them out, and they weren't allowed to be part of the Invictus celebration. Does anyone know when the next Wave 2 Kraken is? I don't know that off the top of my head. I would suggest the whole series is probably a just before 1.0 series. So like when Terra comes out. That whole E is bonkers. 98 some odd thousand SCU capacity. It's basically one or two orgs just to load it. Yeah. Especially since you have to load it at 32 SCU at a time. $8 p.m. Eastern is when I usually stream on Mondays, yes. Oh, 8 p.m. Eastern is when next wave is coming out. Aha! Very fun. So yeah, in about 4 hours and 45 minutes. Pizza. I have to agree that Hull is sweet. You can almost tell Hull was meant to be a starter ship. Yeah. It'll be interesting how they do the Hull B, because the Hull B originally had the spindles at the bottom. So we had like 2 spindles on the side and 2 spindles on top and bottom. So it's basically the Hull A, but with like with 2 more spindles. But the Hull B needs to be able to land on the ground. So the question is, are they going to do just the Hull A, but extra long with double the spindles? Or are they going to do like the 2 spindles and then like 2 on the top rather than 2 at the bottom? So like 2 on top and then 2 spindles on the sides. It'll be interesting to see how they do it. That's probably what's holding up the Hull B, is how to do it. I think the easiest answer is just to double the length. I can't remember exactly. It may have had double the spindles, like 2 spindles, and plus top and bottom spindles. So that might change how they have to like maneuver it. But the Hull B is supposed to be unloaded on landing, while landed, like the A does. Now we're venturing away from lore questions, so I might move on to the next to our lore expedition. Hop in there. Yeah, we're doing a closed expedition, so just for members.
All that much is like technically the org officers are the org bank at the moment.
There's a couple of us there.
Sure.
Need a pickup? I will probably in a bit, but let me kind of wrap this up here. Is there any lore for the Crucible? No, unfortunately not yet. Yeah, cool. If I try and join, if you're a member of the org and you have access to the TeamSpeak, yeah, but otherwise it's closed. Lore-wise, that would be cool and funny is that the UEE reluctantly decided to use the Kraken. Yeah, because it's not a UEE vessel. It's a naval vessel. It's a civilian ship. Wait. Since the Cutlass lacks a head, the Drake porta potty ship. Oh yeah, we call it the Cutlass Brown. We've joked about that one. 2 sets of spindles that add to the top spindles would be what? 32 times 6, so 196 SCU. Which would you recommend for a new player for salvage missions, Prospector or Vulture? Prospector doesn't do salvage. You're talking about the Fortune. And I would honestly say neither, because we're going to have a new starter salvager coming out from RSI in the next couple of patches, based off of the Mantis chassis. So whatever that is, I'd go with that. It's probably going to be like the Golem in the sense of like it's going to be a Golem. It's going to be like a at price. So, question: what's the lore on the longsword? First time I've heard it was with Rock today. I've never heard the longsword. Someone mentioned the longsword. I don't know what the longsword is. I know that the longsword is a weapon in Star Citizen, but I just sort of like, yeah, because I assume someone was referencing something I just hadn't read yet. But no, I don't know of anything about a Star Citizen version of a Star Citizen ship called the longsword. It may be deep lore, but. What year did the lore that they removed the Drake CEO for Andon Arden? 2948. It was right before the Drake sponsored CitizenCon of 2948. The revamped Matrix of Lies says the Hull B is supposed to carry 384 SCU. Yeah, so it's going to need, like, to be extra long. So it's going to need, like, additional spindles, or they're going to need to revamp the spindles because they can't do the bottom one. I know it's just in an emergency. We need a carrier last month type of situation. Yeah. Yeah, I know the longsword fighters from Halo. They may have been referencing that. Whoever chatter's talked about that. Is Drake disliked in the lore because of piracy issues? Because they don't care about who they sell to. So, like, they've been caught multiple times selling to pirates, being like, we don't care. And a lot of Drake ships end up being used by pirates. And because of Drake's own reputation of being sort of anti-UEE, because the Cutlass was specifically supposed to be a frontier Navy fighter that the Navy rejected, and the developers at Drake were basically like, well, it's your loss. We'll do what we want. And so they developed their own they developed it on their own for private militia. And that did so well that the UE felt threatened, because basically the way that they promoted themselves was saying, the UE, we're too hot for the UEE kind of thing. It's like, we're too hot to handle. They kind of promoted themselves as the rebel outsiders. And that got a lot of negative attention from the UEE, which then made the UEE more actively against them, which gave them more publicity because they kind of leaned into that outlaw persona. So. I know there's a longsword cannon, yeah. I don't know which chatter said longsword fighter, but I don't know what the longsword is. That's going to be hard to do, because I think they'll have to do 2 sides. Oh, they could do 6 sides. Yeah. Yeah, there's the broadsword and the longsword, which are ballistic cannons. They're small ballistic cannons. Holby seems to be competing with the hard Argo Raft, it seems. Holby crushes the Argo Raft. What's the size of the Argo Raft? Isn't it like 190 to 200 SCU or something like that? The whole B is like 300 plus. The whole B crushes like the freaking Starlancer in terms of its cargo capacity. Yeah, 2 on each side, 2 on top. That would work. Or 3 on the side, on either side, long-wise. Oh. Yeah, and the whole B is a lot cheaper. When do I think the Ironclad will come out? Probably closer to the end of the year, but this year. If I had to guess, CitizenCon, maybe Invictus, or maybe IAE. $140. Even in game, it's going to be cheaper than the after. Sorry I missed it, but do you have anything specifically with the Cuddy Blue? I mean, I know how it was developed. It was developed as part of a program to kind of bring up the profile of Drake, because the cutlasses were being used explicitly. They were used for a lot of things, but they had a lot of bad reputation for being used by pirates. So in attempts to try to make them look better, they created the Cutlass Blue as a version for the specifically built for the advocacy and security groups, and that didn't go over very well. And none of them did really like to use it, but it was used by Drake enthusiasts, so. It's one of the first versions of the cutlass that exists. Because the original cutlass had its own designation, even like a military designation, and it was dropped for the Cutlass Black monitor after the blue came out. I'm recording this on Drake Day, by the way, for those of you who are wondering why so many people are asking Drake questions, even though there's nothing in the Invictus Hall. All right, y'all. I'm going to rotate over to my lore expedition, or the expedition with my the League of Relic Enthusiasts, my organization. So if you're watching this on YouTube after the ending, you'll be automatically dumped over there live. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you for watching. Like the video, subscribe for more content, and hit the bell icon to be notified when these release. Let me know your own thoughts on any of the ships down below. Would love to have that. And if you'd like to see me do these, I've been doing these more as sort of, instead of recordings, being sort of live streams, because I feel like they fit a little bit better. I don't have to do as much preparation for them as a result. And they're a little bit more free-flowing. So join us live on youtube.com/TheAstroHistorian and twitch.tv/TheAstropub on Mondays as well. If you like lore, content for Star Citizen, I'll be doing lore videos on Mondays every other week. So not this week, but next week. So June 6th, I want to say? June 2nd. We'll be doing that again. Thank you for watching. And like I say every time, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.